Good evening and welcome to tonight's Hearthstone half hour. I'm Hammy, this is Felcroftcast. It's great to see you this evening. Thank you so much if you've taken the time to tune in. Really good to have you here. Sorry that we went on yesterday. I know this is a little bit later than usual. Long story short, PC decided to go bang. We're all back up and running. New hard drive, new fresh install of operating system and all that kind of goodness. So this is our new player topic. It was going to be Monday and we are going to jump right into the whole concept for new players, or if you've been playing Hearthstone a while, taking a think of this in a bit of a different way about Drawpower and what deck acceleration, or the whole concept of deck acceleration actually is. So this will be a bit of a talk episode. Towards the end of the half hour we are going to jump into a fun game at the end and just take all of the different things we thought of and try and put them into practice. We're going to try and build our own deck and take all of the learning in and see what happens in a very extreme situation. So you may have heard, as we jump into the game, us talk in previous episodes about the concept of deck acceleration and drawing cards and really getting going very quickly. So what kind of thing is deck acceleration? Why is it relevant to you as a new player, as a Hearthstone player? Is it really complicated? No. It can take a few different forms. Why is it of use? What interest of it is it to you? We're going to go through that too. We're also going to go through, sort of as a part 3, some things to bear in mind when you're sort of trying to make your deck go quicker, fine-tune that deck, or build a new deck entirely. And then, last but not least, we're going to go through some examples of deck acceleration and show you actually what kind of benefits from deck acceleration as well. So we will go through that too. Quick hello to the chat, and off we go. So the whole idea of Drawpower and deck acceleration, we're going to have a little bit of a general think about it from Hearthstone and card game terms. So if you play or have played any sort of paper card games, if you've played Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or anything like this, if you think a card game, or even if you just play cards, if you played a bit of poker, whist, anything like that, anything where you have a hand of cards and you're trying to achieve some particular goal, then deck acceleration is probably something you've come across. So the whole idea of deck acceleration, there are different forms of deck acceleration, and I guess if you could try and sum up deck acceleration in one sort of pithy line, it would be getting to your goal of your deck in as efficient and quick a way as possible. So how can you do that? Every deck, if you're playing a constructed card game like Hearthstone, every deck has some kind of goal. Naturally, if you're playing, your goal is to win. Obviously, you want to have fun as well. But if your goal is to win, how are you doing that when you're a druid or a mage? Your deck has a theme, and we've talked when building decks about what the theme of your deck is and what you're trying to achieve. Deck acceleration takes that theme, takes that idea that you have in your deck, and then using particular cards or particular combos, deck acceleration, if you have the right tools, and is getting you to that point as quickly as possible in as efficient a way as possible. So how can I take this a little bit more clearly? Let's take, for example, my ladder priest deck here. How are we looking at this priest deck at the moment? So we can see what I've got in there. In the early game I've got some light wardens. They benefit from healing, of course, getting more attack. I've got Noshire clerics, and we've gone through this in previous episodes of the Hearthstone half hour. So my goal in the early game there is to draw cards and trade minions, keep myself alive. With Shadow Word Pain, I'm going to be trading minions. The Wild Pyromancer is in case I come across any area of effect decks, and the Shadow Word Death is a control card. We then get into the mid game. I'm still trying to put some control in with Spellbreakers for spell damage. The Organized Soul Priest, along with the Circle of Healing, means that I deal 4 damage instead of healing it. So that is my mid game goal. And the late game goal is really getting out, really Prophet Velen, Ragnaros the Firelord, mind controls for control, and then doing damage in the late game. So that is my priest deck summed up in one. Let's then look at that through the sort of lens of deck acceleration. So we've gone a bit through my goals in a very quick sense, and we've gone a bit about how those cards go about helping me achieve them. I want to control the early game. I want to try and control the mid game, and then I want to lay in and do damage in the late game. I want to make sure my opponent doesn't have minions. That is my theme on my deck. So how can I get this happening more quickly and more efficiently? In terms of deck acceleration, what cards do I have that allow me to do that? So we go to number one form of deck acceleration that we just talked about. Now, you can accelerate your deck, or you can get towards those goals in a lot of different ways. Number one, the most obvious form of deck acceleration is just drawing cards. When I talk about Drawpower, when you may have seen in previous episodes us talk about, more cards is good in any card game, to a degree, that is true. There are some kind of little subtleties around that. So, the Northshire Cleric early in the game, providing I play it in a sensible way, I don't get it killed, my opponent, as soon as he sees it, is probably going to go for it, then it lets me use the healing of the priest and draw more cards. So drawing cards is kind of form one of deck acceleration. Whatever kind of class you're playing, whatever kind of deck you're playing, having more cards, very, very simply, increases the chance of you having what you want or need for that particular situation. Say, for example, I really need to control my opponent with this priest deck in the early game. I might want my Shadow Word Pains. I might want to be picking up maybe some of my Light Wardens. Or if I'm playing a rush deck, I might really, really want to jump in for that Wild Pyromancer, or perhaps the Organized Soul Priest and the Circle of Healing combo. So if I'm not drawing cards, I'm going to get those slower. I can only draw one card a turn, of course, in a normal game of Hearthstone if I don't use any kind of Drawpower cards or anything else. So in pure and simple form number one of deck acceleration, you will hopefully, if you've designed your deck well, get to your goals more quickly if you draw more cards. Very, very simple. And of course, stepping away from the priest, and we'll have a look at this when we go to sort of forms of deck acceleration later and pick out some specific examples. There are plenty of deck drawing cards that let you draw more cards regardless of the class you're playing, and of course there are those neutral minions as well that let you draw more cards. So in very broad terms, more cards equals good, will give me a higher chance of having what I need and when I need it. But that of course is a very general form of deck acceleration. I don't know, even if I heal away with my Northshire Cleric and I'm healing minions and I'm drawing cards, of course I don't know what I'm going to get. I might get all of the exactly wrong cards for that particular situation. But by drawing the cards in the first place, I just increase that probability a little bit. So that's form one of deck acceleration. How can I get to my goals quicker? How can my deck move more freely, more quickly? I want to be able to draw cards. So cards that draw cards, as we've mentioned previously, quite simplistic, but a good thing to think about when you're building your own decks, or when you're tweaking maybe those decks that you've deck listed or tried to sort of get into off other people, be it websites, pros, all that kind of thing. So a really good thing to do. Now, that is not the only form of deck acceleration that there is. You can accelerate decks or accelerate in other ways. So let's go back to our initial sort of general definition we had. Deck acceleration is getting to the goal that you have for your deck, or the goal that you want, in as quick and efficient a way as possible. So drawing cards helps, but there's also sort of a bit of a concept. There are some cards you can accelerate your deck by including things. I've called it shaving. Shaving's a bit of a weird concept. I'm looking for a better word. If you've got a better word for it and you're watching this video or you're tuned in live, let me, please do tell me, and I will totally scrap the word shaving. But shaving for me is a concept of getting what I want more quickly than I would usually. And how does that differ from card drawing? Card drawing, form one of deck acceleration, allows me to have the options that I want more quickly. So as we've said, it's a very general form of deck acceleration. It is not specific. I'm not going to be able to pick out exactly what I want. But shaving means that in general I'm going to be able to do something in a more quick or more targeted manner than I would before. So I always pick out this example when I was trying to think of it and taking notes for this episode of Innovate for the Druid. What Innovate does is it shaves off the amount of time that I need to actually be able to do something. So if we've drawn a bunch of cards and our hand is full of 10 cards and I've got my Ragnaros the Firelord that costs 8 mana, well that's wonderful, but if it's turn 2, it's not going to do anything for me whatsoever. There's nothing I can do. I can't play that card for another 6 turns. It's sitting in my hand. Who knows? If I continue drawing cards, I might even start losing cards. And don't forget, in Hearthstone, if you have more than the maximum hand size, every card that you draw afterwards just disappears, gets discarded. So you don't want to have, in some stages, too full of a hand. So Drawpower can occasionally be a challenge. We'll come on to that later on. But when we talk about this sort of second form of deck acceleration, Innovate lets me shave a bit of time and it lets me shave turns off my game plan. So a brilliant example of innovate, let's just take something really simple. It is turn 1 and I play an innovate for no mana. Suddenly, instead of having 1 mana, I have 3. What happens if I've gone second and I have the coin? That card that gives you 1 extra mana for 1 turn only. Well, if I'm going second and I play an innovate and the coin, I can suddenly play a 4 mana minion on turn 1. What happens if, lo and behold, I have a full hand and play those 2 cards? Maybe I can play something like a... We'll just pull it out. Maybe I can play my Mountain Giant, and a card that costs less card for each card in your hand. If you then have those deck shaving tools that let you play mana more quickly than you could otherwise, then even if his mother said that he was just big boned, that Mountain Giant is not going to be coming out late in the game. He could be coming out earlier. And indeed, I've picked the Giant very, very specifically because you will have probably heard of Warlock Giants or Mage Giants or these kind of deck archetypes that were popular sort of mid-beta. We've covered those in previous episodes, and I will have some deck lists up for them on the site, but you can see them in previous episodes of the Hearthstone Half Hour on YouTube. I'll give you links to those later as well. So that is kind of deck, examples of really sort of idea 2 of deck acceleration. I can draw more cards, brilliant, but I can also sort of try and find ways by constructing my deck, if the class has the mechanic available. So obviously Innovate is Druid only, but there are things like the Shaman, for example, who can also shave, but I can shave off turns. I can get my game going in a faster way than I could normally, not just by drawing cards, but by using specific mechanics that will let me hit the ground running a lot faster. So the Druid's Innovate is what I think of a great example of shaving. We will just really quickly go to the Shaman because I think he's also worth considering, and there are other examples when we go into the Druid as well. In terms of heroes, if you think about the whole overload mechanic, the overload mechanic is shaving, but it's shaving with a cost. Doing 5 damage? 5 damage on turn 3 with Lava Burst? What happens if I go second with a coin as well? 5 damage on turn 2? That is really, really, really fast. That is doing a lot more damage than other cards for that amount of mana would normally let me do. But the overload mechanic, there is a cost when it comes to the Shaman. So obviously, overload means that next turn I'm not going to be able to use 2 mana. So I am doing something now, but I'm paying for it later. So the overload mechanic in Shaman, very much an example of that kind of thing. Very interesting as well. So form 2 of deck acceleration, how do I shave, how do I get more in less time, not just drawing cards but really getting those cards out on the table. That's kind of form 2 of deck acceleration. It's not just drawing cards, there are other mechanics you can use as well. And last but not least, if you thought that accelerating your deck, or the power of draw in a deck when you're building one is important, it absolutely is. And if you thought that this kind of shaving mechanic we've just discussed is important, it is too. But there is a third form of deck acceleration. There's a third way to get closer to the goal of your deck and to that ideal state, whatever that might be, of your deck and the cards you have in it, that perfect position that you sort of dream of being in, as well as those two. So the third option is, strangely enough, straight selection. So I might draw the cards in the world, I might be able to play those cards really a bunch early, I might be able to shave a couple of turns off, but what happens if I don't have the specific cards that I want? Again, I can have a full hand of cards, I can have Innovates galore in my hand if I'm a Druid, for example, but if I can't actually have the card that I need, then that's useless. So the third form of deck acceleration is selection. Having cards that let you get exactly what you want when you want it. There are some good examples of that too. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick out Sense Demons. You may have seen it in the slate image, the holding image as we came into this episode. But Sense Demons is a little example of it. Say for example I need minions at this particular time. Then okay, they are random demons, but Sense Demons lets me pull those minions out. There are other particular examples of being able to pull particular cards. So Sense Demons is a reasonable example. It lets me get demons when I need them. Let us go for another example as well. Let's go straight to Hunter. Hunter is actually our fourth example of deck acceleration. There's one card in the Hunter deck. So let's find something that will let us pull out something exactly when we want it. The Random Demons is a good example, but there are other such things as well. My mind has temporarily gone on this one. But if we take a quick look at this again, not power overwhelm, but if I want demons as a warlock, then Sense Demons lets me get kind of exactly what I want. I'm using Sense Demons in a situation where I need those minions. Now, again, that is kind of under your control. So, say for example, as a warlock, for whatever reason, the only 4 demons I'm playing in my deck are, I don't know, maybe things like Succubi, or something like perhaps a Doom Guard, a charging card that's going to go and do some damage in the mid to late game. If I play a Sense Demons and I've only built, say, 4 demons into my deck, then I kind of know, unless I've had to discard them already or anything else like that, then I know that by playing Sense Demons and controlling the amount of demons I have in my deck, Sense Demons, if it puts 2 random demons from my deck into my hand, and I've controlled the number of demons, it's a lot less random than you think. If I've only got 4 demons in my deck, and that's an extreme example, then that could come out and do a good job. So you can, by comboing cards, take that concept of selection as your third kind of deck acceleration. How can you pick out exactly what you want when you want it? Now this is kind of a 3.5 or a 4, and the Essential Tomodachi in chat and chats on Twitter before has pulled out a great example as well. This is kind of a 3.5, I would say. It's almost in its own category. It is the concept of picking something specific, but it's got that cost attached as well, very much like we were looking at in terms of the Shaman's Overload mechanic, just a little bit different. Really kind of falls in the same thing. But tracking, you will see tracking and this kind of mechanic in every single Hunter Rush deck almost without fail. Now what does tracking do? It lets you really jump in and say, for example, I need to get something real quick. Of course, it will let me look at the top 3 cards of my deck. It will let me pick something I want from those 3 cards, but I have to discard the others. So if I'm in the mid to late game, I've not seen a particular card come up, and I play tracking, then there's a good chance that I will be able to pick out the precise card that I need. But that's because I've already been playing a bunch of turns, so my cards in my deck, I've got a lot less of them. And if I've got a lot less of them, and I've seen what I've been drawing, then I know what's coming up. Or I've got a reasonable chance, as it's been said in the chat by Bethesda, it is a bit of RNG, random number generation. So I still don't know precisely what those 3 cards are going to be because the deck's been shuffled. But even though I don't know exactly what they're going to be, I can, very much like that Sense Demons, if depending on when I play that card, I've got a little bit more control and a little bit more of a sense as to what's actually going to be coming through. So that's, again, another example of acceleration. I'm just going to have a little think and see, let's have a little flick through to see if we can find some more examples, but we'll do that just in a sec. So that is really the first part of our episode. We are having a little bit of a think about what Drawpower and deck acceleration really are. We've given you sort of 3.5 examples there of different ways that you can accelerate your deck. You can build in cards that will let you get towards your ideal state of deck or ideal state of hand more quickly and as most efficiently as possible. With tracking, for example, we've just seen that there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of efficiency, but it's a key and core card in Hunter decks, so very crucial, very useful indeed. Next thing to do, there are some things, say for example we've said, right, I want to make my deck more efficient, I want to make it faster, I want to make it better, and I want to make it really spot on. I want to accelerate my deck in a few different ways. Well, that's all well and good, but the second thing we're going to talk about is if we've had a think about what deck acceleration is, and we've thought of all of the good sides, as we've just gone through, the good things you can do, well, why would we do these? We've talked about very general concepts so far, about having more cards in hand, increasing the chance of having what we want, being able to specifically pick what we want, but also, in terms of our second concept as well, being able to get what we want faster into play sooner on the table, that concept of shaving. So doing all of these general concept things in a deck, in a constructed card game such as Hearthstone, is of course fantastic. but it's really, really good. But you can actually take that a lot further. So our second point in this episode is, if we're accelerating our deck, well, why are we doing it in the first place? All of those things are great on their own, but why do you want to accelerate your deck? Are there other things that you can do that sort of really come into play? Well, the answer to that question really, really lies in what kind of deck you're making. So let's pick out our hunter, aptly named Face Roll. If any of you World of Warcraft players or warlocks, long-suffering warlocks or warlock mockers out there, we were face rolling a little bit with hunters and really getting involved and having a bunch of fun, just grinding up a few ladder ranks. But taking a look at the hunter and taking a look at tracking, why are we trying to use concepts of deck acceleration? Now, the hunter rush deck we've been through before, so I'm going to go through it quite briefly here, but you can see previous episodes of the Hearthstone Half Hour, and we'll link to those as well afterwards if you want to see our breakdown of this deck. But let's just go through those 3 examples of deck acceleration and how they can work in this deck. Number 1, Drawpower. The hunter rush deck wants to get out lots of cheap minions and do lots of damage to the enemy hero as early as possible. That is its ideal game state. That's the ideal hand. That's the way that the deck wants to work, and those are the goals. So how does deck acceleration contribute to this? Number 1, draw. We want to draw those cards so we can play them as quickly as we can. That seems to make sense. The hunter deck revolves around a lot, as you can see. If we have a look at that mana curve, a whole titanic 29 of our cards are 1 to 3 mana of cost. So in that situation, hey, you want to be able to draw cards quickly because you're going to be able to play them all very, very quickly indeed. There are no high mana cost cards that you're waiting for, so that's perfect. Draw power makes sense. So, of course, we have draw power in the form of the... where have they gone? You have the buzzard. Where is our buzzard friend? Starving buzzard. A nice little example of synergy there. But there you go. Starving buzzard. We always play beasts, of course. There are lots of beasts in a hunter deck, so if I slap down the starving buzzard and summon beasts, I draw lots of card. So if I draw those lots of card as opposed to cards, my plurals are disappearing, it's been a very long day, then that is how draw power, or sort of concept 1 of deck acceleration, works in this hunter deck. Getting those cards quick and really helps us do things. And we've already discussed tracking as well, which I actually believe I've removed from this one. Not essential, but useful. Number 2, shaving. How can we shave off the amount of time that it takes for us to get to that end state? Well, an interesting sort of shaving, but also very tactical card. It's not quite the definition of shaving that we've been looking at, but Unleash the Hounds. Say if my opponent has got a bunch of minions out and I play Unleash the Hounds, it lets me get out a bunch of beasts that I wouldn't be able to get out for any other reason. If I've got a starving buzzard down, each of those hounds will count towards me drawing additional cards. The Arcane Golem, that's an example of shaving. For 3 mana, it's got 4 attack, 2 health and charge. If you look at the Argent Commander, 6 mana. Of course, it's got Divine Shield as well. But you can see the kind of difference between the costs. One is half the mana cost of the other. But it's got a shaving example. And therefore, you can give your opponent a mana crystal. So they've shaved something off a bit there. You have got a higher attacking minion into play sooner than you normally would. However, there is a cost to that, and the cost of that, of course, is that you're giving your opponent the chance to respond with an additional mana crystal. So, example of shaving there, how it can benefit the hunter in some ways. There's not huge amounts of shaving in a hunter deck, but there we go. Example 3, selection. How can we select exactly what we want when we want it? Well, the hunter deck, not going to lie to you, primarily relies on draw power. It wants to get all those cards out real quick. And due to having lots of multi-use minions, it can get those cards out real quick and then summon more cards into the hand really quick just to nail down. So maybe this, not perhaps the best example for shaving, not perhaps the best example for specific selection, but of course I did have tracking in this deck previously. The reason I removed it was just to mix it up and try some different things, but the hunter deck, tracking is kind of that example of selection, but as we've already discussed, it has a cost. So some practical examples of deck building and of those deck acceleration concepts in action. The hunter deck, as we can see, thrives off all 3. Now, we also have, where is it? Oh, giant exclamation mark, question mark deck. Why would we use all of those different kinds of concept? Well, Warlock Giants is a great example. The goal of Warlock Giants is stuff your hand full of cards and then play your Mountain Giant. because your Mountain Giant does a great job when you don't have as many. The more cards you have in your hand, the cheaper it is, and just saying hello in the chat there. But obviously the real basic concept, again, we've gone through this deck in previous episodes in terms of a guide to how to play it, but you stuff your hand full of cards, and then because you stuff your hand full of cards, you then play cards that benefit from you having lots of cards in your hand. Basic synergy. So Twilight Drake, if I have lots of cards in my hand, it's got huge amounts of health, it can trade and becomes hard to kill. It's called Warlock Giants because of that. Mountain Giant costs 1 less for each other card in your hand. If I combo that with other things, if I go second, I can have a very early Giant if I'm a Warlock. And then of course the Warlock life tap power lets me draw it. So deck acceleration in the Warlock Giants decks. Number 1, draw. My ability as a Warlock lets me draw cards. That's all well and good. I want to draw cards so I can have a big full hand, so my late game cards are more effective. Makes a lot of sense. Drawpower is good. Mortal Coil lets me draw cards and pick off minions. Really, really good. Novice Engineer, 2 of one of those, or maybe a couple of those. Again, Battle Cry, as soon as I play it, lets me draw a card. Fantastic. And other examples we have too. Nothing huge in terms of that. But the Warlock's deck, its very power is a draw card. So draw makes sense for this deck for many reasons. Number 2, being able to shave. Well, again, we've actually got cards. The Mountain Giant is an example of a card that has a shaving mechanic built in. If I can somehow fill my hand with cards, then absolutely, I'm going to be playing that Mountain Giant, that really powerful 8/8, a lot earlier in the game. So finding cards that benefit from your other deck acceleration mechanics, which we're going to go on to in a bit, is useful too. The Mountain Giant is an example of how shaving and draw power, 2 deck acceleration mechanics, come together really, really well. And last but not least, selection. Is there anything in this deck that will let me pick exactly what I want when I want it? Well, you may have found, and we found that with the Hunter as well, if you have enough draw power, then selection becomes less and less of an issue. If you have less hard draw, and by hard draw I mean cards you play that actively let you draw cards. There's passive draw as well. We'll touch on that very, very briefly when we flick through some minions in a short spell. But if you've got hard draw, the more hard draw you have, and if you're able to cycle, we'll go through these as well. I know these are new concepts we're introducing, but cycling is of course being able to play your cards as you're drawing them. You know, you don't want to be stuffed with a full hand and start losing cards when you're trying to draw, because that would be painful. So cycling is the idea that you can play cards as quickly as you're drawing them, because that's efficiency of your deck as well. But here, not huge amounts of selection, if anything in particular, but because it's got a lot of hard draw, concept number 1 that we've gone through, it doesn't really need it, which is fantastic. And you can also play those cards pretty quickly in terms of cycling as well. So that, hopefully, for the second part of this episode, we've gone through what deck acceleration could be and given a few sort of practical examples. We've then gone through just a very quick couple of examples of, in a practical deck, why would we use these 3, 3.5, 4 concepts? Why would we accelerate our deck? And how would it fit into a deck sort of plan? How would it fit into how we're building our deck? So hopefully, as you're watching this, you're starting to think of either decks that you're playing currently, how these concepts come in, or maybe even if you want to build a brand new deck, how you could potentially use these concepts and ideas to make sure that your deck's nice and tight, it's working well together, and your cards are all going well together and pushing whatever goal, whatever perfect end state you have forward, which would be really good too. Part 3, we're going to talk about, we've thought about what deck acceleration is, we've accelerated our deck, we've given you some practical examples, 2 very, very, reasonably well-known sort of competitive decks, given particular patches, times, and all that kind of thing, of how all of these concepts come into practical use. But it's not all that simple. There are a few things, just a few basic things you've got to be slightly mindful of when you're accelerating your deck. If you want your deck to be efficient, you've got to be careful of a few things. Number 1, don't forget that all card games of some kind, they don't want you to run out of cards. If you're running out of cards, you're sort of getting you to the end of the game. So there's no deck that you can burn all the way through. You can draw cards so fast, you can pick everything you want, but you've got to be careful of burning out. I think that's number 1 thing to be careful of. If you are getting to your goal really, really quickly, you need to make that goal, or that perfect state that you're in, count. You need to cripple your opponent in terms of the way that they're playing, so that it's going to be very hard for them to come back, or you need to finish them off absolutely. And the Hunter deck, going back to it, is a great example of this. You can draw loads of cards, you can swarm them with loads of minions in the early game, but hey, you know what? If I've not managed to kill people with a Hunter deck by about turn 5 or turn 6, well, looking at that mana curve, what have I got? What have I got in that late mana curve to finish off the game? Not much. So that is a problem. There's a sort of little saying that the star that burns twice as bright burns just half as long. And you know what? That is the whole concept of burning in card games to a T. You need to make your deck acceleration count. So another example, I've been playing Control Warrior recently, and I've probably not been playing it the best I could. Again, we've finished a few past episodes, but you can see that in the early game of this deck, what I'm trying to do is keep the board under control. I want to keep my opponent's minions out of the way. I want to make sure I get some armour on with cards like the Splendid Shield Block. I want to make sure that I'm drawing cards, and with the Acolyte of Pain, things like Slam that let me draw a card. I'm drawing cards, I'm cycling through, I'm controlling with all of these cheap 6, 10, 6, 1, 2, 3 mana curve there. In the early game I've got a lot of control options. But then what happens in the mid to late game? Okay, by the time I've got it under control, I draw up these big minions in the late game. Ignore Red and Storm Rage, I'm experimenting with him just for fun at the moment, having a good giggle. But Grommash, Ragnaros, Gorehowl lets me do control the board early game, cement your authority in the mid game, and finish off with the late game. Grommash and Ragnaros are very much the finishes. I found with this deck that, do you know what, if I've not finished them off by a particular late game phase, then I find myself being, in very, very rare occasions, and it's generally because I've made a misplay, I find myself being ground down. The warrior can't heal. He doesn't go off in the early game, but if I don't play and make my advantage count when I've made that advantage, then I will find myself at risk of being stalled. Now, do remember, of course, that the second thing you've got to remember when you're deck accelerating, things to bear in mind, is that, of course, when you get to the stage where you can't draw any more cards in Hearthstone, you get more damage done to you for every additional card you try and draw. So I've drawn my last card in my deck, I'm out of cards, turn 1, I take 1 damage. Turn 2 after that, I take 2 damage, and so on and so forth. So if you run out of cards in your deck and you burn through your deck too quickly, you're going to be taking damage at some point, as well as any damage that if the opponent is throwing at you, you're also taking damage from your card pool. So remember, although you want to get to that perfect state as quick and efficient as way as possible, when you get there you've got to make it count, and if you do so, then you're also at risk of being stalled. So make it count, beware the stall. Examples of people trying to stall: people who can heal themselves, people who hide behind big tanky minions that they can heal, people who in some very rare circumstances force you to draw cards. That's possible as well. Take a priest, for example. If I've got a Northshire priest down and my opponent starts healing all of his minions, he is forcing me to draw cards. He could do that in a way that decks me out very quick and forces me to take that damage a bit more quickly. So again, worth bearing in mind. Deck acceleration is great. There are many different ways that you can use it, but you do not want to use it in a way that means you can't take advantage of it, or that you actually put yourself in trouble in the late game with that sort of exhaustion mechanic in terms of damage being dealt for every card you cannot draw once you've decked out. Magic the Gathering, some other games like that, for example, the game just ends. You lose. You lose when you can't draw another card. And those games actually involve recycling of cards. Now, this is something that Hearthstone doesn't have at this point in time. Who knows, maybe it will in the future. That'd be a very interesting question for the developers. One that if there's a chance, maybe one of those G+ town halls, I'll definitely ask them. Because a lot of paper card games let you recycle cards from your discard pile, which Hearthstone doesn't. If something's gone, it's gone in Hearthstone. There's no way of getting it back most of the time. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. You guys in the chat, or if you're watching on VOD, please do help me out. So that is really sort of section 3 of deck acceleration and our little run through it. We've had a chat about what it could be, different forms in which you can find it in Hearthstone. We then said, okay, well, why? Why are we going to do this? What's the benefit for me? Why should I try and find these cards and combos? Why should I try and play or maybe build decks in this kind of manner? And then part 3, we've also had a bit of a chat about things that we need to bear in mind. It's not all roses. As we've talked about with tracking, as we've talked about with acceleration or selection, you do have to make those decisions, and you've got to make sure that those decisions count. Now, how do you know when they're going to count or not? It is playing your deck, it is getting experience with your class, and experience in playing against the other team. There's nothing that will just substitute a good bit of playing and really getting a good feel for your deck. Maybe you've got too many draw cards, maybe you want to have a few less. Maybe you don't have enough and you need to accelerate your deck a little more by playtesting and playtesting. Whether it's against the bots or whether it's in casual mode, don't have to do it on the ladder. It's a good way of getting that good feel to know where your limits are and when is the right time to take advantage and when is the time just to lay off a little bit as well. So the final bit of our episode, sort of section 4, before we go and just have one fun game and do something a little bit crazy, is, okay, what else benefits from deck acceleration? What other examples of deck acceleration are there out there? We've gone through a bit of Warlock Giants, we have a look at Hunter, we've discussed briefly the Mountain Giant in terms of a card, but what other examples in practice are there of deck acceleration too? Let us go to my collection out of all of the cards, and let's, for starters, I think it would be good just to have a good look at neutral minions and see what forms there are. Very, very commonplace examples that you will see turn up. And as we flick through, very, very obvious example, if you want to start playing with deck acceleration, how about the Loot Hoarder? You see him in quite a few decks because you can pull him out on turn 2, or maybe sooner, and as soon as he dies, he draws a card. You can do a couple of damage and trade him away. You can keep attacking the enemy hero until your opponent is forced to kill this minion, or you can trade him against a dangerous minion that your opponent's got out. So, common example of number 1 form, hard draw power. Another one, I actually take the Murloc Tidehunter. I think he's selection almost in a way, because if you play a Murloc deck, obviously the goal of Murlocs is to rush. Now, things that let you get more of what you need, or exactly what you need, if you're playing a Murloc Tidehunter and you're doing a rush Murloc deck, your goal is to get more Murlocs out. So really the Murloc Tidehunter is an accelerator in a way. He lets you get something for nothing. There are other cards like that. The Dragonling Mechanic, I believe, the one that summons the Dragonling. There's also the Hunter card as well that summons that beast as well. So there are cards that will give you effectively a 2 for the price of 1. Another form of acceleration, generally seen in rushes, sometimes when you want to defend. So again, another situation where if you're playing that kind of deck, that can be useful. Novice Engineer, hard draw, Battle Cry, as soon as I play it, I draw a card. Very obvious bit of acceleration and quickening and things there, so very, very good as well. Now, the Acolyte of Pain is an example of what I would call soft draw. We briefly mentioned hard draw, cards you play that trigger you drawing a card. The Acolyte of Pain can give me draw power, but it's soft draw. I can't actively make that happen unless I play it in, say, a warrior deck, or I can damage my own minions. So he is hard draw. The Acolyte of Pain in a mage deck is hard draw, depending on what else you have. As a mage, every turn I can ping this Acolyte of Pain for 2 mana, 1 damage with my little mage power there, my hero power, and I can make the Acolyte of Pain, if I want to as a mage, be a hard draw source for me, but he's not hard draw by design. He needs to take that damage. If I can't do that damage to him, I don't draw cards. And of course, if my opponent ignores him and doesn't do damage to him, then I won't draw cards either. So soft draw power. Just had a look at the Arcane Golem as an example of sort of shaving, an interesting one there. Cold Like Oracle, it's certainly acceleration, but it's got a downside there in terms of giving your opponent a couple of cards as well. Another interesting one. And as we just flick a little bit quicker through, because I'm just mindful we're coming up to our half hour, we will keep chatting away in the chat in text after we finish the episode, as always. The Rosefen Hunter was the example of a selection that we saw. A 2 for 1. Lovely stuff. That makes things a little bit faster too. What else have we got? The Dragonling Mechanic as well. It's another 2 for. Gnomish Inventor, a bit more expensive, not really quite so common, because why have a 4 attack? If occasionally see some use in some tanking decks, but kind of quite handy. The Cult Master, again, that's sort of more of a soft draw whenever one of your other minions dies. Soft draw power can be accelerated in that kind of way. As we charge through a bit further, there are some legendary examples that I've not shown you, which I'll quickly go through at the end. Again, a swarming example, not quite a selection one, but sort of in those rush swarm decks. There might be a place for the Violet Teacher as well. Always good. Now, weirdly, I think this is an example of selection, or possibly even an example of shaving. Many is the time when I've been playing against a faceless manipulator. Pardon me, a little bit of a dry throat. And, you know, I've played my mana Ragnaros or my Grommash Hellscream, you name it, I'm sitting pretty, and then suddenly this guy for 5 mana gives me exactly the same problem as I've just given my opponent. So the Faceless Manipulator is a situational card. However, it does really kind of accelerate things. So it means that for 5 mana I can get out a 8 mana card, a 10 mana card, or in a specific situation I can really get what I need. So it's kind of like a selection card and a shaving card as well. A little bit of both. An interesting one there. Not quite as common, but definitely has some very good uses. Very much worth considering if you're facing particular problems in some kind of metagame. If there's a particular set of decks you're struggling against, maybe that card could be for you. Sort of a 2-fur or a many-fur. That's sort of also that kind of Hearthstone mechanic where you're just getting more for your money, or something that triggers away. We've already discussed the Mountain Giant. The Molten Giant, of course, teams up well. The more damage you've taken, then that's cheaper as well. So that is kind of a shaving card too, these giants. There's also the Sea Giant as well. 1 less for each minion on the battlefield. So if I've played a whole bunch of, something like Murlocs or something like that, or if I've flooded the field with whelps or something similar, the Sea Giant is suddenly very, very cheap. An interesting example there. I'm just really quickly going to jump into crafting mode and then select Legendary as well, to give you a few last examples. So Nat Pagel, Drawpower, been changed a little bit. A slightly less chance of you drawing those cards. It was originally at the end of your turn, so if I played him turn 2 at the end of my turn I'd have the chance, but now I've got to effectively wait another turn for every subsequent card effect, but still good. Blood Mage Thanos, just like the Novice Engineer, the Death Rattle of Drew a card and you get that additional spell damage early in the game. Plenty of good uses for that there. Leroy charges on in, but he's got a cost. You summon the whelps that could actually kill him next go unless you can do something about those whelps, and he's only got 2 health. So he is a great example of shaving, but you shave the cost there. You get the additional damage quick, but you're going to be in pain because of it at some way or another. As we fly through, well, Christ, I don't even know. He's not deck acceleration, he's just evil. Nozdormu. Much pain indeed. So, in terms of neutral minions, that's a quick look at some very, very brief examples of different forms of deck acceleration. The final thing that we are going to do, going to remove that legendary, is just really quickly flick through all the different classes, and we're going to jump in and take a look at other examples of shaving class by class as well. So Druid, we've already mentioned Innovate. Deck acceleration, shaving there very much so. Druid decks will let you, if you pack a couple of Innovate and certain minions, depending on how you design them, accelerate by getting things out just quicker than you could do normally. Other Druid specific stuff that could maybe, I'm going to jump into just crafting mode here so we can actually, it's always another thing I say, if you haven't seen the cards yet, we've not got all of the cards yet, always put it in crafting mode so you can see pretty much everything that's going on. We could have also done this here. I'm just slightly mindful of that, so I'm going to charge through here. I don't think we really missed anything massively significant in terms of bits and bobs. No, I think we're good with the neutral minions. So, in terms of Druid, obviously Innovate, a huge shaving mechanic and one that you're pretty much going to play into your deck 100%. There's no reason not to. Unless you've got something very, very targeted in mind. Bosh. So, Innovate, you can't craft Innovates because they're a natural card. Other kinds of deck acceleration that we have in the Druid deck, running on through. And again, you've just got some draw power there in terms of nourish. So Wrath, also those sort of either-ors. You see a lot of either-ors in the Druid deck, but you can draw or do damage, you can draw or do damage, you can draw or heal with the Ancient of Law. 5 damage and drawing a card is more of an added bonus on that Starfire. And then if we jump into crafting, more minions, less time, a form of shaving as well. That's pretty much our Druid. So, in terms of Druid bits, it's really taking a look at shaving, but also some draw power. Hunter we've already discussed, so I'm going to fly through that one, but really the Hunter specific cards. You've got your Scavenge, Buzzard Beast that you can drop in, and it just goes well with Hunters because of the whole beast thing. We've already talked a bit about tracking, Unleash the Hounds as well, giving you that sort of situation option to really turbo yourself forward. And then you've sort of got a twofer, but with Death Rattle. Never underestimate Death Rattle cards, they can be very, very nasty. Mage. Mage is another class. You've seen Mage Giants. They are very good. Beg pardon me. And obvious reasons for that. Hard draw power, Arcane Intellect, 3 mana, draw 2. Good stuff. And a nice shiny golden one as well. Love a bit of that. So you do actually have some other little examples. Sorcerer's Apprentice, that is deck acceleration, because it lets you get, really it's shaving. Your spells cost less. So there's also the other card as well that lets you play minions for less mana as well. So that's also a form of shaving, and I forgot about that in Warlocks too. The Summoning Portal is a shaving as well. So you can really Release the Hounds does not make me happy, says Tomodachi in the chat. You are not the only one. You are not the only one. I've made people unhappy with that card, and I've been very unhappy at it too. Lots of charging in there. So, an example of shaving in Sorcerer's Apprentice. We've got some hard draw, and if we zoop out of into crafting mode and see if there's any other bits that we can grab as well. We also had mentioned in the chat earlier the Archmage. Whenever you cast a spell, put a fireball into your hand. Again, that is really making you very dangerous in a very short period of time. A fireball is substantially more dangerous than being ground megas of jelly donuts. Indeed. Thank you very much for that. Acceleration on secrets there. A bit of shaving with it if you're going to play a secret, but you don't see huge amounts of Kirin Tor mages. It is still a shaving example, however. Paladin. A minion when it attacks, draw a card. Straight up draw power. Lovely stuff. Drawing cards to have many as you have in hand for an opponent. Draw power. Absolutely. Draw a card and deal damage to its cost. 8 health and draw 3 cards. Again, that's because of the 8 mana, a bit of a late game option for our Paladin friend. But it is draw power, so it is another form of deck acceleration in terms of our little tick list that we've been going through. And next up, we've got the Priest. Priesty friend, I know very well. We've already briefly gone through the Priest again, so I'm going to say that things like Mand Acceleration, random copy of a card into a hand, situationally useful. Northrite Cleric is really our big piece of Priest acceleration, of course. Then Divine Spirit, doubling a minion's health and then making a minion's attack equal to its health with Inner Fire. You can almost argue that that's minion acceleration. You can make a very cheap minion very powerful very quickly. An interesting one. You do see that come up with Priests, where they suddenly unleash a 2 mana minion and then suddenly it becomes like ridiculously powerful and strong. Much pain. Other forms of acceleration we have in the Priest. Thought Steal, 2 cards from the opponent's deck into your hand. Yeah, you've got a bit of that there as well. Other bits and bobs that actually give you that sort of turbocharged approach. Nothing huge on the Priest side as well. So class specific wise for the Rogue. Let's keep on turboing through because we have just about hit the 40-minute mark, so we really have to finish up a little shortly, just so you guys can get on with things and we can keep it to actually being a Hearthstone half hour. Turboing through a little bit more, we have bits and bobs there. Let us find examples of shaving in a Rogue. Rogue shaving. Card draw, obvious one. The whole combo mechanic in a Rogue is actually kind of shaving too. If you can line up your cards, you get additional benefits which probably outweigh the amount of mana that you're putting in. Worth considering as well. Sprint, very obvious draw power, but the Rogue of course is very good. Preparation is an obvious example. The next turn spell you cast this turn costs 3 less. Well, again, that's very much shaving as well. Getting something a lot quicker than you could normally. Very good indeed. And then the other example of kind of shaving as well is Shadow Step. So you will see that with cards with charge. So you play a Leroy, you play a Shadow Step, and then you play another Leroy. If you've got 10 mana, you can use Leroy Jenkins to charge twice in a Rogue deck. So beware Shadow Step in terms of shaving too. We discussed Shamans in terms of the overload mechanic and how that is shaving anyway. So we're not going to go through all of those, but Farsight, drawing a card that costs 3 less, makes it a lot cheaper to play, which is very handy. We can charge through, see all of the different spell damage effects and things we can get. The Mana Tide Totem is just direct draw power, and that are 2 very core mechanics for our Shaman. Not only the shaving, but also some good draw in there too. Most of the Shaman shaving generally revolves around sort of casting spells and getting out those effects nice and quick. The Warlock, we've talked a bit about the specific selection element of Sense Demons, and I'm very, very glad that I've actually remembered. The second thing, in terms of that summoning portal, that is shaving. Your minions cost 2 less, but not less than 1. Cheaper minions, faster than you would normally get them out, and more as well, don't forget the volume. Now, also, the entire Warlock deck has got a, as well as the draw power of the ability, has got a concept of shaving as well inherent in it. So, for turn 1, I can have a 3 attack, 2 health minion. Fantastic. They normally cost 2 mana or 3 mana, but I deal myself 3 damage. So, as we go back to our original point, make sure that you know what the consequences are of your deck acceleration. The Warlock has a very early hit as a class in general, but what it does is obviously does damage, has negative side effects, things like drawing cards and things like that, so you have to be careful of all that kind of thing. I very much saw. Juraxus, one day you'll be mine. Anyway, my little deviation aside, I'll just quickly jump out of crafting mode and ensure there's a few little things that I've missed. Yeah, go back to have a quick look as Rogue as well. We've already done the Shadow Step thing, had a look a bit at the Shaman things, nothing hugely, but we've charged through there. More coil, draw power as well, similar bits and bobs in terms of 2 damage to a minion, but if it's friendly, give it 2/2 instead. So variation, very much like the Druid as well. Lots of good options in terms of acceleration for the Warlock. And Warrior. You've got draw power, you've got slam, you've got various other things. You do have some minions as well that have acceleration sort of built into them as well. Slam lets you draw, which is great. Frothing Berserker for a warrior. Minions taking damage, they can become very quickly, but they're passive. You have to make sure they're either activated by your opponent. Draw power in terms of that kind of choice as well, with shield block. And then that are really the sort of 1, maybe 2 key concepts for our warrior friend. So that completes our massive charge through. That is probably going to be the end of this Hearthstone half hour. To summarise what we've been through, I'm sorry that we can't jump into any practical examples, but what we'll probably do for sort of a fun follow-up, maybe later in the week, Thursday or Friday, when we do something fun, have a bit of an episode off, we will put together the most accelerated deck that we can, that's not a normal archetype. So we'll take these into practice in a future episode, maybe this week, maybe next week, where we try and build a deck that's sort of a little bit original, around something a bit fun, not a Hunter Rush deck, not a Warlock Giants deck. Just go and see how many cards we can draw as quickly as possible with the most efficiency possible and do something really crazy. But thank you very much for tuning in. So as our episode summary, what have we done? Well, as I jump onto our end screen, we have covered what we think deck acceleration is. We think deck acceleration, from my humble opinion, is the way of getting to your ideal state of play in the quickest time possible, but in the most efficient way possible, not doing it at the cost of losing the game, for example. We've then discussed 3, maybe 4 different types of deck acceleration. Pure draw power, just having more cards. The idea of shaving, and I really want a better term for that, so if you've got a different term, I'm probably just being tired and a bit dense, let us know what you think. But the idea of playing something sooner than you would generally normally be able to, or being able to play more of what you want in a faster time as well. So the innovate mechanic of the Druid, summoning additional minions, that kind of thing. We talked about selection, being able to pick out those specific cards that you want when you want them. Also meaning that you can charge on in and really pick out exactly what you want at any particular point in the game. 3 kind of concepts, and then sort of the 3.5 kind of concept of what the cost is for those particular things as well. What happens if I can do one of those things but I've got a cost, whether it's the Warlock's damage he's doing to himself, whether it's the cards discarded by tracking or similar other things, making sure we bear that in mind too. The third thing we sort of talked about was 2 things to bear in mind. You need to be accelerating towards something, you need to have a purpose, and you need to be able to make that purpose count. Which means the rest of your deck has to be reasonably tightly made around your acceleration, or your acceleration has to complement the idea of your deck. And you need to know what the flip sides are to your acceleration too. If you're not able to make it count and there are flip sides, then you could just be doing yourself more harm than good. So drawing cards all the time, as we've discussed, is not good if you run out of cards before your opponent and you've not finished them off. Good example there. And last but not least, we've taken a real turbocharged sort of charge to all the different classes of neutral minions and just picked out a few different examples of acceleration that you might want to try and give a go. And maybe things you can try and build decks around. But go and find fun minions, go out and pick your favourite class, and then just have a think about what acceleration it has, and how maybe, just maybe, it could combo with other cards like the Mountain Giant or otherwise to give you a nice fun new kind of deck. So that is it for tonight's Hearthstone Half Hour. We have hopefully given you new players, or you slightly bit more experienced players who are then thinking of taking that next step or tweaking your decks, making your own decks. Hopefully that's given you some food for thought. As our sign off, where can you find us? You can find us at youtube.com/Failcraftcasts, and it's got our whole archive. We also do a bunch of other games as well, other Blizzard games, other MOBA games, PC stuff, and we're going to start doing a bit of 3DS and console as well, just for a bit of a break. But Blizzard games and Hearthstone in particular are our bread and butter, and we love them to bits. So please do come, subscribe on YouTube, and let us know what you think. Go and look through the archive. Brilliant stuff there. Twitch, we're live. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in live. It is great to see you. Shout out to Bethesda and Essential Tomodachi who have joined us this evening, as well as Daliasaurus as well, and all of you other guys who you can see lurking in the background there as well. Really great to see you guys getting involved live in the chat, and that is twitch.tv/Failcraftcast. Twitch accounts are free. You can sign straight up for one of those, and you can get emails when we are live. It is generally 7:30 to 8:30 PM GMT at the moment, so that is UK time, Monday through Friday. Schedule: Monday tends to be a new player episode. This one on Tuesday got delayed. Tuesday we generally tend to do an arena run of some kind. Wednesday is ladder. Thursday is taking a look at some tactical concept. And Friday is generally a different game or a bit of a day off and some fun. So 4 to 5 nights a week of Hearthstone if you want it. The website is failcraft.org. There you can find not only all the videos and blog posts surrounding them if you can't watch a video, but you can also find things that live better in a static format. So things like deck lists, maybe slightly more tactical articles, and good links and resources for new players of a bunch of different games, including Hearthstone. And last but not least, Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/Failcraftcasts. When we're not casting during the day and similar, we love to have a chat with you guys there. And if we can have one final ask before we go off for the night, please, 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 if you love the episodes, then do let us know what we're doing good and what you'd like to see more of, because then we can make more stuff that you guys want to tune into and enjoy. And if you've not found it so great, not found it so useful, perhaps not enjoyed it, do you know what? That's fine. Not everyone is going to like all of the content that I try and do. But what we would love you to do is just, take the time, if you can just drop us a tweet or a comment, if you just let us know what you didn't enjoy, but then what you'd actually enjoy, how we could improve things for you, then we'd really love to hear that from you as well. So that is us for this evening. Thank you for your patience and for tuning in. I've been Hammy. This has been the Hearthstone Half Hour on Failcraft Casts, and hope to see you again tomorrow night or very soon at a tavern sitting